Hey there, CJ Math students. Welcome to Math Task 11A, Introduction to Algebraic Expressions. Yesterday we were talking about the building blocks of algebra patterns. Today we're going to get into our expressions equations unit because these are the true building blocks of algebra. So we have some definitions right off the bat. Looking right over here, we have things called coefficients. These are the numbers that are in front of or attached to variables. We have variables, which are letters that are placeholders for unknowns at the moment. And then we have constants, which are numbers that are all by themselves, not attached to variables. The important thing to note today, whenever we are trying to work one of these problems, the first thing we want to do is go through and keep change, because knowing the sign of whether it's the coefficient variable or the constant is going to be super important to combining like terms and simplifying these things. So let's practice just identifying terms, variables, coefficients, and constants. Let's go through first and make sure we KCC everything. So we're going to keep this, change that to addition and a negative, and then everything else is plus, so we're good to go. So right off the bat, terms. Remember, terms are just anything that's separated by an operator, and then make sure to include its sign, whether it's positive or negative. So we've got negative 5a is a term, followed by negative 7 is a term, followed by 5d is a term, followed by h is a term, right? So we have 4 terms in this expression. The variables here are a, d, and h. Those are the unknowns. The coefficients, the numbers attached to those variables, are negative 5, because we have negative 5a, and 5. We have 5d. There's also one other coefficient that's kind of invisible. Anytime a variable is by itself, such as h here, it has a coefficient of 1. But instead of writing 1h, we just write h, because 1 times anything is that thing. And so we just have to recognize that a variable by itself has a coefficient of 1. And then we have constants. We have negative 7 as our only constant. It's the only number that's not attached to a variable. Right? You're going to do this one in Edpuzzle, but the first thing you need to do before you go through it is to make sure that any subtraction is changed to its opposite. So plus a negative 5, plus a negative n, plus a negative 8k. Remember that negative n has a coefficient of negative 1 in front of it, right? So you're going to do that one in Edpuzzle. So here were your answers, right? Remember that coefficient of negative 1 is one that can sneak up on us because it isn't written, but when you have a variable by itself, if that was n, then the coefficient would be 1, but since it's negative n, the coefficient is negative 1. All right? Something else to remember before we get on to some practice problems here is that there are differences between expressions and equations. Expressions are variables, coefficients, constants, but no equal sign. And equations have an equal sign, so they can look exactly the same, but equations have equal signs. Like 5 plus 2 equals 7 is an equation, but me just saying 5 plus x without the equal sign, that's an expression. And then the last thing that we're going to figure out today is that like terms have the same variable and the same exponent. Right? So 5x and 3x are like terms. They both have x and they have the same exponent. They don't have any exponent, or you could also say they have an exponent of 1, right? But 5x squared and 3x are not like terms. You can combine 5x and 3x to make 8x. You cannot combine 5x squared and 3x because this one has an exponent of 2 and this one does not have an exponent at all. So this would be simplified to 8x. This is simplified. You can't do anything to it. All right? So let's try one problem together here and then we will do the rest in groups. So it says write and then simplify an expression that represents the perimeter of the rectangle. Well, we know the perimeter is the distance around a shape, right? And since this is 5x, we know the bottom is 5x. We know the other side is x because that side's x. That's what we know about a rectangle, right? So perimeter just means add up all the sides. All sides. And so that's what I'll do. I'll say x plus 5x plus x plus 5x. These are all like terms. They all have the same variable and the same exponent. They don't have an exponent. And just remember that anytime you have a variable by itself, it has a coefficient of 1. So those x's are really like 1x, right? So 1x plus 5x plus 1x plus 5x, that should give us 12x. So that is our simplified expression. Now, if I keep on reading the problem, though, it says evaluate the expression for x equals 3. So like, let me pretend I told you that x equals 3. All you're going to do is plug in. So you take your final expression, simplified 12x, and now instead of x, you're saying I know that x is equal to 3 in this scenario. So you plug in 3. What is 12 times 3? It's 36. And it'd be 36 units. I didn't give you any units here, but that's what your expression is equal when you have to evaluate it for x equals 3.